When you're doing that interview with that newspaper reporter, it very rarely does that newspaper recorder record word for word exactly everything that you say. They probably won't even use a tape recording device. What you'll see them doing is furiously scribbling down notes as you're discussing things and you're having a conversation. And then somehow or another they take all those scribbled notes and they turn that into a newspaper article. So what you're going to want to do is you want to speak clearly, concisely, in those short, one-sentence, one-liners that reporter is going to be able to get down on paper, and it's going to be more likely that you'll be quoted accurately in that story. You don't want to overwhelm them with information. And another good way to keep that story clear for the reporter is for you to tell a story about what happens in your classroom. Again, make sure you've honed it down to the most essential parts. But that story would be something easy for that reporter to tell in his article that would get across the message that you're wanting to convey. Okay, you're on. So this is not Jerry Springer. You don't want those conflicts. You don't want that rudeness or those types of things. You want this to be about education and not about you. So be polite. It's okay if you're nervous. I don't think any of us would ever do an interview without being a little bit nervous. It's okay. Just remember to breathe and to smile, especially if you're talking about your students. Being with kids in a classroom is a joyful thing. And so we want to smile when we're talking about what happens in our classroom. So if you're prepared and you've got that message ready, then it's going to be okay. You're going to do a great job. Remember, you're not here to please that reporter. You're here just to share what you know about what happens in classrooms in Arkansas every day. And if you do that, it's going to be great. You're going to do a good job. Okay, let's talk about those tough questions. And I talked to you a little bit about this a few minutes ago, that bridging. And we were talking about the ABCs, the acknowledge the question, and then that bridge. When you get that tough question, that bridge back into that area where you feel comfortable sharing your information and sharing your knowledge. So whenever you look at this slide shows you how quickly it can happen. The first thing you're going to do is acknowledge the question. That's a really great question. But sometimes you get that question that is tough. You don't feel comfortable answering, then use that bridge to pull it back. That's a great question, but what I see happening in my classroom is, and then tell that story. Or that's a great classroom, but what I hear other teachers saying is, and then bridge it back. Bridge it back. It only takes a few seconds. That bridge can take about 5 seconds. And then you can bridge back into that message that you want to hone in, that you know is the most important message for you to be able to convey. These are a few sample bridging phrases that you can use. Another question I'm often asked, or the most important thing to remember is, those are some phrases that you can use that you can control the conversation. You see, whether or not that reporter has an agenda or not doesn't matter. You can control the conversation. Politicians do it all the time. You're smarter than any politician. You can do this. You just have to get a few of these bridging statements, put them in your back pocket, put them in your toolbox, have them, and be ready to pull them out when the conversation goes in a direction that you don't feel comfortable going, or you know the conversation doesn't need to go. Let me give you a few examples. Maybe you get a question where the reporter is going in on some tiny little point that of the whole conversation, and you know if you go off on that tiny little point, you're going to go off into the weeds somewhere that you don't want to go. And you might say, you know, I understand what you're saying, but let's pull back and let's look at the big picture. Let's look at what's really happening in classrooms all across our state. That will keep the conversation going from going in a direction that you don't want it to go. Because real quickly, reporters can pull that conversation out into those weeds, and the interview can be totally something different than what you intended it to be in the first place. So take control. You can do it by using those bridging statements. So practice those. Again, get that buddy and have her ask you some of those questions that may pull you off topic, and then practice using that bridging statement to pull the conversation back to those main 2 or 3 points that you want it to be about. This technique is not only great for using in interviews, whether it's with a print reporter or a TV reporter, it doesn't matter. But this technique is also great for use with administrators, for use with parents, for people in your community, even with spouses. It's a great technique for you to use and to practice. Practice it in your conversations. Practice it in your classroom. Use those bridging statements to pull the conversation back to what you want it to be about. Okay, let's talk about those tricky questions for just a few minutes. You're going to get some questions that they may want to ask you. Answer yes or no, or true or false. If you get a question where they're asking you to answer yes or no, or true or false, you can't win by answering yes, and you can't win by answering no. You don't want to ever answer those questions. For example, tell me yes or no, are the Arkansas standards being effectively implemented? There's no way you can win with that. You don't want to answer those types of questions. Or another example, maybe the question itself has some inaccurate information in it. For example, as you are teaching the state-mandated curriculum, how does it affect? Well, the question itself has something inaccurate in it. You don't have a state-mandated curriculum. So if you don't take the time to correct the question, then the audience is going to think, well, that must be true because he said it in his question. So you've got to correct what's said. Well, you know, I hear that a lot, but what is really true is, so you want to make sure you stay within the topic and stay what's true. And don't ever let the reporter try to feed an emotion into you or buy into what the emotion the reporter is trying to put into your mouth. For example, as a teacher, doesn't it make you angry when? Well, if you answer yes, that makes me angry, or no, that doesn't make me angry, you're either going to come off as being the angry teacher or the teacher who doesn't care. So don't feed into those negative emotions. You want to say something like, well, you know, what I see happening in my district, or what I see happening in my classroom, or what I'm hearing from my parents is, you know, don't feed into those negative emotions. You can't win. You can't win when you do that. There's the pregnant pause. The reporter sometimes, especially in a TV interview, or maybe even in a newspaper interview, will use the pregnant pause. He'll just pause and not say anything at all. It is not your responsibility to fill dead air time. Don't feel like you have to fill up space. We said it before, you know, if you go on and on about a topic, that makes you look less credible to the audience. So answer the question that he's asked clearly and concisely, and then stop. the reporter's not going to let that dead air time go on because that makes him look bad. He's either going to fill it up with a comment or another question. So answer the question. He may ask the same question again in a little bit different way. If he does, that's okay. Give your same answer again. You know, you don't have to feel like that you've got to answer in a different way to please the reporter. You know what your message is and answer the way that you feel is the correct way. If he asks it 3 or 4 different times, then answer, and you have that same answer, then keep answering it the same way, or use a bridge into something else. He's not going to keep asking it over and over because that's going to make him look silly to the audience, and he's not going to let the dead air time go on because dead air is not a good thing for a reporter. They may bombard you with multiple questions at once. They may throw out 2 or 3 questions all at one time. And that's okay. If they do that, you can just say, well, I heard your questions and I'm going to choose to answer them one at a time, and then proceed to do that, answering each one individually. Or here's what I like to do. I think this kind of works best. From those several questions that he has given me, instead of trying to answer them all, I'll pick out the one question that best fits the message that I want my audience to hear, and I'll answer that question. Then the reporter may choose to come back and ask those other couple of questions again, or he may just choose to move on entirely. So that would be up to him. But that's your choice as the person in charge. Believe it or not, you can be in charge of this interview if you will stand your ground and answer the questions as they are asked. This happened several times probably in the year before us. Sometimes you can get ambushed with materials that you've never seen before. Maybe a reporter, this was especially true in the months past when we saw all those Facebook math questions that were floating everywhere, and maybe the reporter comes up and hands you a piece of paper. I would like for you to comment on this. And you've never seen it before. You have no idea what this is. You've not had time to look at it. Just take the piece of paper from the reporter. Don't take time to look over it or anything. Just take it. Keep eye contact with that reporter. Smile and say, you know, this is the first time that I've seen this. Set it aside. I'll be happy to look at it later, and then I'll get back to you. And then move on. You don't have to comment on everything. You don't have to be the expert on everything. Just stay in that realm of your expertise and comment and talk about what you feel comfortable about. Don't rush. Take your time. Don't feel like you have to attack every question. You know, be comfortable and just talk about what you know about. You know about kids, you know about classrooms, and you know about education. Stay on topic and stay on message.